Hello there, this is David Benedictus for CoolCouve again.
Hello, I'm Daria Ruggles. Welcome back to CoolCouve.
Today we're interviewing Diana Perez, the candidate for Vancouver City Council Position 3. Diana is a wildlife biologist and former state director of the League of United Latin American Citizens. She's running against construction contractor and Westside Neighborhood Coalition leader Glenn Young and former Clark County GOP chair and current president of Active Republican David Galatby. So I full disclosure live in the county, but I always interested in how different, I know what county government structure like, and I pay attention a little to the city. And the city positions are all at-large position. They're not district. They're not individual districts, they're all at large. And there's 7 council members, as I understand from looking at the city website. And then the mayor and council members serve 4-year terms. And one of the council members is then elected to be the mayor pro term in case of the mayor's disability or when they're out of town. So welcome, Diana.
We're so glad you're with us. Thank you, Diana.
Oh, you're welcome. I am very happy that I'm here with you.
So please tell us a little bit about how you got into this position of stepping up and being a local leader, and what were the issues that engaged you?
Well, Daria, it was not an overnight decision to run for office. It was a culmination of 10 years of civil rights advocacy in the community and seeing up close the need for equitable policies. And also coupled with building the confidence to know that I am able to run for office. Because I think when you grow up in an area that civic engagement or civic health is not a priority within your community, you feel like that's not for you. So that my upbringing is very different. And it wasn't until I got involved in community advocacy work that I said that I just have to do something. I have to give back. And being a professional, I had a lot of skills to be able to give back. And I thought that, okay, now's the time to do it, with wisdom and confidence. And I got nothing to lose. I'm putting my name in the hat. I've got some good relationships. I've done a little training to set me up. I'm going for it. And it was the appointment process when I believe it was Alicia Topper vacated her seat, and there was an appointment where folks can apply. And I thought, why not? I just finished a training with Emerge Washington, and I put in my application. I was one of the finalists and had some good momentum, and thought, you know what, I'm going to keep going. I have to. Why would I not? And I did. And that's when it was a crowded field. In 2019, I believe there were 7 of us, and I came in 3rd, 450 votes short, or 410, somewhere around there from the primary. And I thought, those were 410 doors I could have kept knocking on. And so this whole new world of running for office opened up. And I remember saying to myself, my God, this is hard work. A different type of hard work. But then I thought, you know what? We deserve somebody who's going to work hard for us. We've got some major issues. We keep kicking the can on some major challenges, immigration reform, all these other national issues that are facing us right here at the local level. Especially with what happened with the Trump administration. But you can see I'm getting riled up, and I could go on and on this, but long story short, it was not an overnight decision to decide to run for office. I take it seriously. It's a lot of hard work. And in the end, it's not about me. It's about our community. It's about the greater good. It's about amplifying the voices that we do not hear. It's about the missing middle. I am not invisible. and neither are my relatives, my family, my community, and so forth.
So let's just move on from that and talk about what distinguishes you from the other candidates then that are running. We have Glenn Young and David Galatney.
Obviously, I am a woman, and I am a person from the east side of Vancouver. Right now, we don't have any current representation from the east side. I am a voice and lived experience that has never been on Vancouver City Council before. I bring over 10 years of community advocacy work and civil rights. I have over 25 years of public land management and the experience of a statewide commissioner. Currently, I'm a commissioner for Washington State Parks.
Oh.
And my skill is hearing, learning, incorporating, and I intend to rebuild systemic changes that's going to make city government better for everyone. So I'm going to use all of that and bring it to the city of Vancouver for the benefit of everyone.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. So can you be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more specific about, your experiences from the community and the nonprofit work that you've done that will really inform your city council position?
Sure, a lot. There's, I would attribute 3 or 4 skills. One is critical thinking, which is paramount. 2 is being able to use data to make good, informed decisions. 3 is communication, and that's being able to be transparent, open, honest, and not afraid of a good, healthy debate. I think it's important to have good, healthy dialogue. And the other is relationships. We may not agree on everything, but there's a lot we can agree on. And so usually we're after the same thing. It's how we get there that is so different. So we just have to put ourselves aside and really think about the prize, what and how we're going to get there together. Because alone, we can't do it. So it's important for me to be able to use those main skills. And that's how I've been able to do a lot of the work that we've been able to do with the League of United Latin American Citizens here, because when we center our decisions on the most vulnerable, everybody benefits. So having that decision-making process where you're hearing not just from like-minded people, but you're hearing from people who think very differently. And sometimes it's a different language and it's uncomfortable. So I've been able to navigate through that and get and build that confidence and build that ability to not get stuck in the weeds of the minor differences, but really focusing on the end result and capitalizing on where we do have common ground so that we can get there.
That's excellent. I have a little follow up about that, though. I realize that theoretically, we want to end up in the same place, and looking at undergirding values that we all share is wonderful. Sometimes it feels, though, that some of the things that are going on, I know that David has had some experiences with his neighborhood that he may want to talk about a little bit more, but there are some behaviors and there are some polarizing aspects that make some really distinguishing choices. So what do you want people to know about how you differ from some of these? I'm being cagey.
Well, you don't have to be cagey. I mean, it was stated right in the Columbian, that forum that the Columbian reported. I mean, it was right out there in the open. What was the embalmment of the?
Yeah, the climate change being a hoax.
Yeah, and
let me tell you, I was sitting there in that room, and I have quite a few thoughts on that, but I was surprised and not surprised. Does that make sense? First of all, I didn't know Yeah, I didn't know Earl or Dave Coop. And when they'd say climate change is a hoax, they just proved to me how different this other side is, and how from a person with 2 science degrees who's worked in public land management, who's seen our climate just get more extreme, it's like, so you had nobody that you know gets sick from COVID, and you obviously must have air conditioner or not, or you live in a good place, or you aren't seeing the wildfires and the smoke hazard that we had last year. Did you have, cognitive dissonance is what I was experiencing,
Mhm.
where it's facing you and you are in complete, either you're blind or or your education is showing.
Yeah.
And and I don't mean that disrespectfully, because I don't want to disrespect people, but I was aghast, and I just sat there and go, oh my God, we cannot have this type of thinking lead our city. We
Mhm.
will fail.
Yeah, right.
Well,
People will die because of that thinking. People have died because of that thinking.
Exactly.
especially during the pandemic, we saw the numbers just mounting and mounting and mounting. And when I heard Jason, well, this is a summary of the Columbian Review. As reported in the Columbian at the recent candidates forum, Earl Bowerman and Jason Foreman both said that they decided to seek public office because they felt that white people were being pushed out of and made guilty to run for office, and the climate change and the pandemic was overblown. So I went, what? And I mean, there is no shame in, those, as a white dude, 17-year-old white dude, those were hurtful to me to hear that. And my background as a healthcare professional and a believer in science, and I was really saying, I was thinking, well, anybody can run for office, and people who are educated can also be willfully ignorant for whatever reason they have for that. But we need people of vision going forward. And that statement sounded like, let's just keep the status quo. So
There's a lot to unpack on a statement like that, but I just had to laugh, David. I just have to laugh. There's no other, for me, no other reaction than it's, you just laugh. Like, oh wow.
Which makes me think, Diana, it's like where they talk about the best humor comes from pain.
Yeah. I mean, what can I say? I can't say anything that's gonna change how a person who thinks that way or feels that way. There's absolutely nothing I could do personally. But to me, it was like, okay, here is major fragility showing its best,
mhm.
and major lack of some barrier to compassion and humanity. And it was interesting when Earl Bowen was saying everybody's equal, we're all this and this, and I'm like, exactly, that's what we both agreed, that's what we want. But it's not like that. It's not like that. That's what we want, but it's not like that.
And the facts bear this out.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about redlining or some of the atrocities that have happened in history to people of color, the facts bear this out.
Yeah. And so when a person denies the facts, I mean, that's what we
Laugh.
suffered through in the last administration.
Oh boy. And that's kind of the point of all of this, and why we want people to know what distinguishes you, because there are repercussions to that. There are real things that happen, and like you said, it isn't overly dramatic to say that when you are on that trajectory, people will die, and it will be the most vulnerable people.
Mm-hmm.
So let me bridge in. So why is it important for city council? What does city council do that these things are important? What does city council
Well,
do that these things are important for the people of Vancouver?
so where the people, the communities can have power, where there's no control over what's happening at the national level, it's at the local level.
Mhm.
The local levels build and shape our future. And in many cases, lead changes. So for our Vancouver City Council, we need to take our assets and amplify that, as well as using best practices from other municipalities and other cities. But we're such a unique location, and let's capitalize on that. We don't need to be worried about businesses coming here because they're here. They're coming and they're here. We can't keep up with the housing.
Mhm.
We just can't keep up with it. There's 190 people, 197,000 people. Now we have program services that can't keep up with the demand. We have two major interstates through the heart of the city. We're situated right next to a mighty Columbia River outside of a metropolitan area, and then they include us in a metropolitan area. And we got the big national forest right in our backyard. We have the amazing, beautiful state parks in our region. Gorge, we're at the gateway of the Columbia River National Scenic Area. We're like just down a couple hours, hour and a half from the coast. We are in a beautiful location, and people are finding that out, and people are moving over here, and they're not going to stop. We're going to keep growing. So we need to figure out how to balance the demand of that growth and our needs with our natural resources. And that's a tough one. That's going to take a city council team that is strategic, that is looking at the bigger picture and the better, and that is centering our most vulnerable in those plans and making bold decisions and saying words that are going to reflect those who don't see themselves reflected in city council right now. So we have a huge missing middle.
Mhm.
Our market is housing market is missing out on many people.
The affordability.
The affordability, the homeless crisis is a crisis. So that's where we cannot continue to do status quo. We have got to come in with some newer approaches, zoning reform, talking to our partners, bringing in the developers to the table, ensuring that it pencils out both for our residents and the developers. So we just have to approach some of these challenges differently instead of a siloed approach.
Mhm.
Instead of a plan by plan by plan. We can't do that. We don't have the luxury, we don't have the time. And so when we talk about the climate action plan, that should be fundamental to everything, all our operations, all our projects. When we talk about housing, when we talk about zoning, when we talk about transportation, when we talk about the equity, everything should be
A
foundational.
systems approach, because
Yes,
it's all different systems. And
exactly.
one thing that you just said, Diana, that really struck something. So you were just mentioning about how we can't even, businesses here, people are coming, we're literally having to deal with that in terms of balancing with natural resources and inclusivity. So one of the things, I'm sorry, I'm going to call him out here, that Galatly, Galatly said, he basically positioned it like it's a choice between this overwhelming homelessness and this, this boogeyman approach, or having businesses. And I know that the homelessness crisis and people experiencing homelessness is a huge problem. So, but if you have any ideas or things that you want to talk about that has to do with not vilifying the most vulnerable. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Can I just insert one thing there? Again, from that forum, the county is the lead agency
Right.
on homelessness, and the city has a certain specific focus. I think they're buying a couple of hotels or motels for specific type of housing needs and such. I'm
Speaks to the
sorry.
silo thing though, right?
Yeah,
You're talking about inclusive, being inclusive and looking at systems approach. So how would you like to see the conversation continue?
Right.
On the homelessness challenge, yes. First of all, I think it's important to acknowledge the real fear of the small business owners or the business owners of the trash and just what people are afraid of, right? So it's important to acknowledge that, but then also to come in and say, and here's how we can begin to address it. So the city has gotten together with the county just recently, by the way,
Good.
to form this executive council, right? To really push that envelope. And that should have happened, a while ago, but it just happened recently. So that's good. And number two, usually the answer comes from those most impacted. So I believe we should be talking to our community who are houseless because they may have answers that we haven't thought of. They're the ones who are impacted. I think that the city came out with a good interim short-term plan because there was no plan before. So now everybody's like, yay, we got this plan. But there's this, it's not the plan. It's just a short-term immediate response because we have to do something. And part of being strategic and thinking ahead is the navigation center is a perfect example where when the pandemic came, I mean, that was like the perfect door to close or, but the perfect opportunity for the city to just close the door on the navigation center. Well, they closed the doors, but was there a response to how the services were going to be provided for our homeless who were getting services from that center? Where were they going to go? There was no like, okay, this is where you can, we're going to close, but this is where you can go. This, in the meantime type of effort during the pandemic. And so it was, it was sad to see how that happened. And for our houseless community, the disparate and the disproportionate impact on our vulnerable populations as a result of the pandemic was just highlighted big time. So the plan is short-term, meaning it just came back after it. So what we need is long-term. What we need is long-term. And what we need is a cross spectrum of different options, because not everybody is the same. Not everybody's needs are the same. And everybody says all drug addicts, all mental health. Well, you know what? I know a lot of people that aren't houseless that are drug addicts and have mental health. So let's not couch everyone because the houseless population is growing and there's a lot more senior citizens now, a lot first-time homeless people. They deserve to live with dignity too. And so this long-term solution includes affordability, being able, so here's something that I learned. The multifamily tax exemption. Not everybody knows it, not everybody understands it. So I'm like, okay, I gotta get this right. I gotta learn this. If I'm gonna run for city council, I gotta understand this. And all this time I thought, but the 90,000, we got to change that. And that's a red herring. The whole 90,000 medium income level that Portland has. And that's, city council has the ability to change the area median income, not past the thresholds that legislation has set, like the 60%, 80%, so forth, but they can change that percentage. City council can change that intermediate income percentage for affordability. So part of this is bringing in our developers, coming up with something that's going to pencil out, that we're going to be able to have affordability targets throughout the city, using that tool. The MFT tool was an economic tool and an affordability tool. Let's use it, let's revise it, let's expand it. Duplexes, triplexes, coming up with supportive housing. The Elwood supportive housing, that's the first, I don't know if you heard about it. You've heard about the Elwood supportive housing? Yes. So that is on Fourth Plain. They were able to, Vancouver Housing Authority, the city, and another nonprofit built a supportive housing apartments, and they weren't able to do that unless they were to reform the zoning code on that site. And they did that. And so this supportive housing allows people to have a roof over their head, wraparound services for behavioral, for employment, for it's bringing in those services that they need to start building the ability to stabilize under a home and a roof, right? So those type of support, we should have more supportive housing units. Which means we'll have to look at our zoning codes to be able to do that, which means we'll have to work with our developers. So there's this, we got to really talk about, what's that saying? Basically, I don't want to know why I can't. I want to know how I can. And so we just need to think of it differently and go for it and learn from it. If it doesn't work, it's okay. We can't beat ourselves up, but we have to do things differently. We have to try new approaches. The tiny village that's coming up at the Fruit Valley Terrace by Community Roots Collaborative, that's a beautiful project, right? So that's where we can work with the county to be able to cite land for opportunities like that. So that's another one. Where we can work collaboratively and jointly with the city and other the county and other nonprofits to be able to strategically think about the cross spectrum of housing needs, affordability needs, not just have everybody in one location in one neighborhood, because that's how you start building segregated neighborhoods. We don't want that. So we want everybody to thrive. We want everybody to live with dignity. We want everybody to have access to safe parks, to groceries, to restaurants, to wraparound services, so I don't know if I went on your question, but that's one of my top priorities, is to be able to really tackle this in new approaches and in partnership and collaboration.
It's wonderful. And is Elwood connected to the Fourth Plain Commons? Because that is another one over here on Fourth Plain. I know the mayor is very pleased with it, and it's going to have the community kitchen, the test kitchen that supports.
That would be, that's a different
than Elwood.
So, yeah, I will put up the link to Elwood. So you can see it.
Yeah, definitely. I remember reading about it. So so what I love hearing is that there's a few creative ways to create genuine inclusivity.
Equitable development is another one. So equitable development is where you do public and private investments, programs, and policies in neighborhoods that you take into account the past history and the current conditions to meet the needs of the underserved or the marginalized populations, so that you are reducing disparities, so that you can create the quality of life outcomes like a good education, living wage jobs, a healthy environment, easy transportation.
Let's go to transportation, because that seems pretty connected to all of this. Because one of the things you see is that with the affordable housing issues, that people with less means have to move farther and farther and farther out to have affordable housing. How do they get into jobs? And then when we're looking at the future, 10, 20 years through the lens of the science of climate change and all wanting to breathe,
Yeah.
good air. This seems like a really critical time to me to look at the transportation issues going forward. And so what do you think about that as you look at taking on a leadership position in the city?
Recently, the city had a workshop, and I was pleased to see this, where they are working on their transportation system plan. And it was a couple of slides, if you look at the workshop, said advancing equity through transportation. And so that was beautiful because it was looking at where the city was investing. Where are they investing? Where are they not investing? And so looking at those neighborhoods where there aren't any investment. Wow, it's also a neighborhood that's lower income, doesn't have very many, sidewalks, but it's also areas that, not all of them, but it could be areas that were annexed. And so they were managed by the county. So they don't meet the sidewalk standards and so forth. So here's this transportation system plan that is actually looking at where the city has and has not invested and considering that in their new plan. People are moving, so there's a lot of new developments that are coming. I think the city needs to walk the talk as far as, for example, their city operations building should be built on the top highest environmental standards possible. All vehicles should be electric vehicles, clean energy buildings, the city should be the role model when it comes to transportation tied to our climate reduction of emissions, gas emissions. Also, the Washington Health Disparities Map. If you take a look at that, our area is the majority of our census tracts are high risk for air quality because we got 2 interstates through the city. We got the Columbia River with the boats and so forth. We got the railroad and we got the airport. So, and we got the wildfire smokes and the air that just comes in from the gorge and settles. So we have that, but we also have a lot of natural resources that help with addressing climate. So it's not just about electrifying, it's also about looking at our natural resources and the role that brush and trees do. So the bridge replacement, I think there's been a great effort to look at the equity portion of that bridge replacement. There's a committee that's been doing that, making sure that the people are aware and invested in the principles in guiding that. Rapid bus transportation is going to be critical, especially in those neighborhoods with high density. And so just being strategic about that is important. Also multi-mobility, with, where you plan from age 8 to age 80 and you're looking, it's not all about bikes. It's about these new up and coming mopeds and scooters, and we have an aging demographic, and so being able to walk also to the next neighborhood. So that whole 10-minute to a park, 20-minute neighborhood concept.
Yeah, walkability is a measure now in real estate, and we do the micromobility part of that. And by the way, I attended an 880 that was put on by AARP. This idea of planning from someone from when they're 8 years old to 80, not only just in the different phases of their life and aging, but like thinking about what it looks like when you're 8 years old and looking up at something, and how much more frail you may be when you're 80 and what that means. So I really hope that we see a lot more of that. We have a great example right across the river here. Portland is considered a leader in this, and I hope that we can learn and have some creative choices in terms of micromobility, because it's kind of like going back to what you were saying before. If the Army Corps of Engineers and the military is acknowledging climate climate catastrophe, then this is just should be an unchallenged fact. And it's the same thing if the money makers and the real estate are saying, oh, well, here's the livability index and the walkability index. How on earth can we still be planning with sprawl?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And exactly. And so there's also the urban growth boundary too, and areas that the city could potentially annex in the future. And so the county, interestingly enough, the county right now, those areas that the city could potentially annex in the future are managed by the county. So the standards on sidewalks and roadways are very different than it was if it was under the city. So that's why when the city does annex it, there's like, oh my God, it's quite an investment. For example, I live in an annexed area of the city and I'm still on well water and I'm still on septic. And I had to replace my well water a couple of years ago. But anyway, and I still don't have a sidewalk. But it's just, and that's just East Vancouver. So where can the Vancouver grow now? It's going to be north.
Yeah.
So it can't grow west anymore and it can't go south, and it's gone as east as it could. So now it's north.
Mm-hmm. And also the mayor was talking about how land has become more scarce and we need to go north this way too, like up, right?
Yeah.
And, and this reminds me of that saying, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Growth is inevitable, but sprawl is optional. So when I think of the best possible way of having this systems approach to growth, very much including transportation planning, is human centric, about mobility. It's not about an auto-centric way of being. So for example, when we speak about sidewalks, the idea of having a sidewalk on a 4-lane, 55-mile-an-hour road, who wants to walk there? Would you rather walk along Andreessen, or hey, maybe let's walk in Officers Row? Which would you choose? So, there's this throwing in and sidewalks are expensive, but sidewalks by themselves are not they are not necessarily creating walkability just on the face of things. We have to look at the whole picture, to me. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I agree. I think it's smart growth and being able to think about it that way. Otherwise, we're stuck piecemealing. For example, 14 on East Vancouver in the mornings to try to even get to work, forget it. It's backed up all the way. They knew that it was going to be built, and but they're like, oh, we'll deal with it later.
Oh, yeah.
So here it is.
And that drives me crazy because the name for that, you probably know this, Diana, is called induced demand. You cannot build your way out of it. That is what creates sprawl. And the fact that they were like, oh, we'll keep, that's how you started this conversation, is kicking the can forward. And so doing business as usual is deeply wrong and creates terrible problems now and for the future, which is why we need someone like you.
Yeah, Dara. And here's the challenge with that is change. Change is hard for people, some people, not all people. So that when you see high-rise apartments being built in your neighborhood, change elicits fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's mitigating and balancing all those competing interests. And sprawl is not the answer. Sprawl just is backwards. So it's going slow to go fast as far as planning goes, relationships, communications, acknowledging the fear that some of our residents have.
I think that's beautiful that you point that out. And I fully agree with you. And I just have to say, in terms of sprawl, I just have to add this in there, that the federal government is now taking responsibility for the harms of sprawl to BIPOC, to our people of color, through this nation, putting these huge highways and cutting up thriving neighborhoods, and where there was there was life on the street. And by the way, we all know that's what makes the street safe, is feet on the street and knowing your neighbor. And the measure of a great city is how it plans for its most vulnerable.
Yeah. Yes. Amen.
David got me riled up because he knows the transportation is right now is like, oh.
It's huge. I mean, it's connected. And we have so many priorities intersecting our climate, our environmental justice, so those are the two big ones. And, the equity that we're all learning and growing from as a movement.
So, David just sent me this thing right before this. We were talking to Ed Hamilton Rosales, who has your old position, president of LULAC. And David mentioned this book called Forget the Alamo. And it was, David, you should speak about it. But the reason I'm bringing it up, David, is because I would love for you to speak about how we can address locally this polarization of not facing facts and calling people who are moving towards truth and reconciliation versus this accusation of changing history when in fact it's the opposite. So can you talk about that a little bit? I know we're going off in a different direction, but
well, it'll get us back on, because as we were preparing to meet with Ed, I was looking at this idea of exposing our students K through 12 and college students to the real history and separating it from the myth. Everybody knows that Washington. Now, everybody who reads history knows that Washington never chopped down a cherry tree, and that was made up. And there was all these things that were made up. Well, I didn't realize it, but the Alamo, Davy Crockett and all those guys, that was a made up story as well. It was a myth that came out of that period. And there was these two authors down in Texas who were rewriting that and talking about how the economic pressures of the slave trade and wanting to keep Texas growing cotton and bringing that money in was what caused that war, the Mexican-American War down there, and that was around that issue, and it wasn't around the myth that they were providing freedom or something like that. So these two authors wrote a book about this, and I can't remember the name of the book. Do you remember?
I think it's called Forget the Alamo.
Forget the Alamo, right. So they were doing in Austin, they were scheduled this week to do a lecture on the book. And Governor Greg Abbott of Texas got his political machine together, and they shut down the lecture at the museum in Austin, Texas.
First time in their history.
Yeah, so just so that that information doesn't get out there, to keep the myth going. So the reason you wanted me to share that was about
because I was wanting to address this idea of talking about facts and dealing with people's fears and understanding, which is a lovely way to come from a place of understanding, Diana, and at the same time not losing sight and not letting certain people hurl accusations of things like divisiveness or rewriting history when in fact it is the facts. And how do we get to that place where our values do overlap and they are these undergirding principles? And because right now I feel like this is exactly what's at stake with the difference between you and at least one other person, which is David Gallatley. He is operating from this premise. So I don't know, just had to bring that up. I might be cutting all this.
Yeah, no. So who's controlling the narrative?
Mm-hmm.
Who's controlling the narrative, and who has power? And who's using their power to control the narrative? And it's a fight in my opinion, for the narrative.
Mhm.
And we just have to keep, pushing. We have to keep doing good trouble. We have to keep speaking truth to power. We have to keep speaking truth. And thank God for our advocacy groups. Thank God for our people who are out there, who are independent radio stations and so forth. And granted, it goes both ways, right? So it's a matter of ensuring that we continue to operate on our values, that we continue to see where we want to be, that we continue to push the narrative forward, use every platform that we can to amplify the narrative so we could take back our power of truth.
Thank you. Boy, you really brought that around. Thank you.
Well, and let me just tag that. I became aware through my contact with Daria, who's a city dweller, that the city council is council and staff are developing diversity, inclusion, and equity values and policy statements that they'll look at all development and transportation development through and healthcare and all of that neighborhoods through that lens. But that's what they're developing right now. It's in the process of being developed. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, well, how do the national issues of affordable healthcare and income inequality, environmental racism impact the decisions made at the city council? And why do we need that DEI lens to look at these issues? One of the things when we were interviewing Ed Rosales was, and it ain't just a checkbox. You need to have people with lived experience making these decisions. That was his statement. And that's why I'm so attracted to the message that you're talking about here. But it really is an understanding that these DEI issues have been, just like our infrastructure has languished so long, we have these platitudes about it, but we're really not engaging in that in our planning and our active vision, these principles. So what does the city have to do to make this live and come alive, and not just a checkbox on the page?
Mm-hmm. Which is all part of that is right, going where people are. If you want to include them in true equity means including them in the process. So soup to nuts. You don't just go, hey, you, which one do you pick, 1, 2, or 3 at the end of the process, right?
So the city just hired their DEI director.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Step 1.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
The city just hired their DEI director. And so they have a lot of internal growth to do. So it's looking inside, just like we would as an individual, right? We made the conscious effort to want to learn about this. So we're going to read up about DEI. We're going to listen to podcasts. We're going to take a class. We're going to, it's a muscle in your brain. It literally is. Because you want to learn. So the city's doing the same thing. They hired a DI. They're going to internally learn and grow, look at their systems, and become the change that they want to see their city become. Our role, and I say our because I'm a member of the public at this point, is to hold them accountable to that. To say, here's a statement. I want to see your statement operationalized. I want to see you walk your statement. I want to see your programs that are being delivered be delivered with diversity, equity, inclusion values. I know it because I know DEI, but not a lot of people know that yet. There are very different journeys out there of individuals. Some have a very long way to go, and others are right there leading at the forefront. But when it comes to the city, we look at transportation, programs, services, and policies, all with that DEI lens. And what that means is that we're making sure that we are centering everything on the most vulnerable. And at the end of the day, when we're on the dais as a city council member, I will be saying to myself and to my colleagues, did we do everything possible to help our most vulnerable? Did we center our most vulnerable in these decisions and in these plans? So that's what I will be bringing to the council with my colleagues. And I know I'm not the only one who thinks that way. Thank God. I know other council members think that way too. So I'm also interim chair for the Southwest Washington Equity Coalition. And this coalition got together after the administration changed, so the Trump administration, and there was all this anti-immigrant rhetoric and just horrible rhetoric on people of color. And so we came together, our local leaders, and we held each other because we just couldn't believe what was happening. And we've continued to do that. And we went on our own journey of DEI training. And we formed the coalition. And so the pandemic hit us and we were planning an event, but now we're leading the Southwest Washington Advancing Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Southwest Washington, the teach-ins. I'll put it on the chat so you can see it. And it's a cross spectrum of organizations and people, community leaders that we're all have this mission of advancing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the city and the county are helping to sponsor that.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Well, we have just 4 minutes left.
That was fast.
That was fast.
We're going to have you back, Diana. If you're willing, we would really love to have you back.
Yes.
But as a last question, what are you the most proud of achieving to date here?
I am most proud of the youth that I have been able to mentor and have been involved in this movement and who are now leaders themselves. So for example, Xaviera Martinez, so she's an officer with LULAC. Lindsay Luis, she ran for Vancouver School Board in 2019. She's now at WSU. Tammy Pham, who's one of my high school junior. She's a high school junior and she's on my campaign as our graphics person, and it's her internship. Of our young ladies that Anna, Lily, I am most proud of them because they have taken their life and their experience and they are leading. They're going to be leading. So one of my platforms is establishing a city youth council. So if there's one legacy I want to leave for the city, is a city youth council, because they're the ones who our decisions today need to make sense for, because they'll be living with them in the future.
What a great way to teach civics too. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. 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 So I'm most proud of what I've been able to do for our youth.
Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to bringing you back, probably if it's okay with you, sooner rather than later, because we have so many other things that we can listen and learn and discuss together.
Yes. Yes. I could talk about how we worked so hard to help our families who were displaced from the wildfires, who lost everything, their cars, their homes. Yeah, I could talk a lot.
Yeah, and we're facing, I was counting, I think there's like 5 wildfires in Oregon right now and 11 in California.
Yeah.
And then Idaho's going and
Yeah.
next. Oh my goodness. But that's for another time. So thank you all for joining us today. Stay cool and stay curious in the CoolCouve. And we'll be back with another program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Come back. More Diana coming.